Thank you very much. Good morning and welcome again. I'm very pleased and honored to be here today to present this talk, Monitoring Your Application Performance Using InspectIT APM. Before starting, I would like to briefly introduce myself. I'm Alain Lompo. I'm a software developer at Senacor Technologies AG. I develop software usually with GAE or Spring and Spring Boot frameworks on the backend side. And depending on the project, on the front-end side, we use React or Angular apps. I have also a huge interest in graphics programming. I love reading, and I love also fishing. But I don't have my license yet in Deutschland. So, to start with, I would like to talk about my motivation for this talk. What brings me to the idea of making a talk on application performance monitoring with InspectIT APM. In the beginning, computers were really big and software were simple to develop. But now, this tendency has been inverted, and softwares tend to be bigger and bigger while computers are getting smaller and smaller. And it seems like monitoring seems to follow the same trend. And the question I'm asking myself, is it possible to continue to do simple monitoring? It really seems like the creative spark is racing very, very rapidly and in all directions. So monitoring software seems to follow the trend. Therefore, I looked into InspectIT APM as a rescue option. So before diving deeper into InspectIT APM, let's quickly see what we can do with InspectIT APM with a quick demonstration of how it works. So the first thing that I will do is I will run the InspectIT APM central monitoring repository, and it's running. In the second place, I will run the user interface. And in the third place, I will run an InspectIT agent along with my application to monitor. So for that, I will go to my application folder, and I will execute a Java command giving the agent as the complete path to the InspectIT agent, and then specifying two properties. The first one, give the repository and the port it's listening on, default is 9070. The second will be a suitable name for my application under monitoring in InspectIT user interface. Then I use -jar, and I give the name of my application package jar. So we can see that here. The InspectIT agent starts to run. We see its pre-main method starting and running completely. And then after the agent has run, we see our pet clinic sample application starts to run also. Here we are using an embedded Tomcat, and it will run on the default port. The log trace will show it. We can see here that the application started on Tomcat port 8080. So now I can go and perform some additional actions on the application in order to provide InspectIT APM with some data on which to feed and make the monitoring. So this is a classic application used for demonstration. We have some owners, veterinarians. I can browse through the list of the owners, make a few actions, maybe edit an owner, change the name here, update the informations, maybe add a pet, for example, Garfield, give a date information, make it maybe wrong to get an error, correct it then, and save it. I can also browse the list of veterinarian, and we have also an error page that simulates what happens when we have an error. So I think we have already enough information for a first monitoring session. I come back to my InspectIT user interface, refresh it. This is my CMR node, and look for the pet clinic name that I gave in the beginning. And I can ask InspectIT to display the list of traces. So I can see here the traces. I will maybe make this a little bit bigger. And of course, I can also refresh this list. And we can see easily by looking at the informations of these various traces that we are getting the data directly from our application under monitoring. Of course, I can go further and see more details, see exactly where the request is coming from, the methods that have been called, and every information related to execution time and all other type of details. And we can see on the left panel in the Data Explorer that we have a list of default pre-configured InspectIT sensors that gather data for different types of information that may be useful for us. For example, SQL statements, or also timing data, JMX data, etc. So that was the first quick demonstration, and I really find it interesting that with InspectIT we can quite easily and quickly bootstrap an application to monitor it with InspectIT APM and get by default already some significant and interesting data. All right then. Now let's dive deeper into how to set up InspectIT APM. Before doing that, of course, we just need to talk a little bit about the approach used in InspectIT APM. In order to monitor our application, we kind of turn on the light under the hood of our application. That means we use these InspectIT APM agents to bring light to the part of our application that, as users, we don't see directly. And we use the analysis of the reports as well as the automatic problem detection possibilities to fingerprint the problem and then to get rid of them. In this slide, I'm representing the three main components of InspectIT APM. The first part is the agent. And speaking here about agents, we are speaking about Java agents that we can use in InspectIT, as well as the browser agents, mobile agent, .NET agent, etc., and the integration that InspectIT can provide with CollectD. A Java agent, like what we have seen in the example, is a special type of Java application that uses a pre-main entry point instead of a classic Java main entry point, and it's used to instrumentalize our Java application by being able to set up some hooks directly in the application bytecode and provide us with significant and useful information. The second part is here the central server, and we can see that it's made mainly of two storage components, the analysis data storage as well as the long-term monitoring database. The analysis data storage is the one used to provide information to the analysis user interface that we have been seeing and used in the first demonstration, our rich client. But InspectIT APM also provides RESTful services, and this data storage feed the RESTful services with the data, and we can query these informations, especially when we want to make some custom tools to make some customized monitoring display. The third part is the user interfaces. We have already seen the analysis user interface, the rich client, but we have also the possibility when we are using the long-term monitoring database to be able also to connect into InspectIT APM with other monitoring dashboards such as Grafana, for example. If it happens that in our company we need to use some more custom display, maybe in our intranet we need to display the reports in a specific way, we have also the possibility using the RESTful services that are exposed to build something, a custom user interface, a custom tool to display these monitoring reports in our intranet. So after that, now we can talk about how to practically get the InspectIT APM and install it and run our monitoring sessions. The first thing, of course, will be to be able to download the InspectIT package. We can do that directly on the official website from InspectIT, and they also provide a GitHub repository where we can download the different package for the agent, for the user interface, and for the CMR as a zip package on the GitHub repository. To run the central monitoring repository, we can do it using a simple Java command, for example, java-jar, and we run the jar, but in that case, there's a small risk that our local JVM may not be compatible with the JVM that InspectIT is using, so it's better to use the startup script that comes with the InspectIT package to run the central monitoring repository. Once we have done that, we can simply run our user interface like I have done from my desktop, and then we need to run our application and at the same time inject the agent into the application that will be running. So that we do with the -java agent. We give it the path to the InspectIT agent. And as I've said before, these two properties are useful. The first one to locate the repository, and the second one to give a suitable name to our application under monitoring, because we may be in a context where maybe we are monitoring different applications, and it will be interesting to be able to distinguish them easily from the CMR node in the Data Explorer. All right, going deeper in how InspectIT works, InspectIT uses some sensors to gather the data, and these sensors are instances of agents that collect the data in a specific way. And as you can see here, InspectIT provides a rich variety of sensors, such as the database sensors, exception sensors, HTTP sensors, and the names are quite explicit. We understand from the names directly what they are doing. The invocation sequence is a special type of sensor that does not itself do directly any action, but it gathers the other invocations from the other sensors in a timely way, so that we can at any time have a timely sequence of invocations that has been performed in our monitoring session. And so, again, talking about these sensors, we can also categorize them in two big categories, I would say. The type of sensors that are interested in platform events, what happens on the platform side, such as CPU events or memory or maybe hard drive, everything that is related to our platform, and that is not directly an event from our application. And the method sensors are sensors that are interested in events that takes place in our application that is under monitoring, and this type of sensors create set up some hooks on life cycle events from our application under monitoring. Yeah. Another interesting feature that comes relatively recently with InspectIT APM is the ability to realize some end-user monitoring. That means here that we would like to be able to also get information from the client side of the web application, not only from the service side or the backend side. That way, we can add in our monitoring data significant traces that are related to what the end user of the application is really experiencing. And that gives us such information as rendering time in the browser, loaded resources, JavaScript execution time, Ajax method calls, etc. Anything that's taking place on the browser side. Of course, these information will be complementary to the other information that are coming from the server side. And this is made possible by some extensions of the InspectIT agent to be able to inject some required JavaScript code into the server's response. And for that, there are mainly two APIs that provided the matrix. These are the performance timing API and the resource API, and they can be available via properties values in the browser, and they should be, of course, included in the instrumentation in order to be able to do that. And at that moment, JavaScript functionalities and Ajax calls should also be included. So then the information that are gathered are combined to get a more realistic monitoring actions. Now let's see, again, a little bit deeper how to work with InspectIT APM. We analyze the different reports that InspectIT APM provide us, and we can also, of course, conduct some automatic problem detection. So now I will again run a new monitoring session. I will use another application to make the illustration. I want to be sure that I stop my previous application because I'm using by default the same HTTP port 8080. And I will go now to a lab folder here. I need to be sure that my CMR is running. So I run it again. And then here I can use the same command that I used before with the change to the name, the agent name. This name is what I see in the Data Explorer. Let me call it, for example, Lab 2. And of course, this application is also different. So now I'm using an admin starter application, and it's packaged as a WAR. So we can see again that the agent is running first. We see the traces of what happened in the pre-main and in the pre-main entry point. And once the agent has finished running, it will bootstrap the application, and the application will start to run as a Spring application. So yeah, we have default logging with a lot of information that are not maybe very relevant to us right now. And so this application is also accessed directly on port 8080. And here I have something with, first I need to log in. And then, yeah, I have an application that looks more like cars retailer or in a car business. I have here, and it's interesting, the table that's paginated, so I can just generate a few datas by browsing through the different page, maybe change the size of the page. I can also maybe update one of the model, test model, for example, save the action, go back, delete a few more. This, of course, I'm doing just to get some data that InspectIT can feed on to generate the monitoring actions. Come back to the home, go to the layout, maybe change something in the settings. Display the list again. Change maybe the theme, take something green here. And I think I have already a certain amount of data. So now let's go back to our InspectIT user interface, the rich client. I'll refresh the Data Explorer. In the list here, I will see the new node for lab 02. I will ask InspectIT to display the trace, and I will refresh this view. And as you can see now, we have the actual information that have been displayed by InspectIT APM. So it's quite interesting to see how fast we can do that and how relevant the predefined configurations are. We can here take a look, for example, at the invocation sequence I was speaking about. And this will give you exactly the timely sequence in which I have performed the different actions on the application. Of course, we can always get to more details. And in these details, we can also see in the call hierarchy whether we have some SQL instruction that have been run, which methods were called, whether we have exceptions that are generated, etc., etc. The possibilities are really very interesting. Another interesting feature with InspectIT APM is the use of diagnose for the automatic detection of problem. And here what we have is a problem knowledge database, or called here a problem instance repository, where we store the different problems that are known and the new problem that will be found. When we conduct a monitoring session, InspectIT APM generates the traces for us, and these traces are validated against a set of rules that are aware of these problems. And of course, when the patterns shown in the traces match the rules, the problem will be detected. So that's what's going on in the background of this problem detection, automatic problem diagnosis. The interesting thing also is that since InspectIT 1.8, the diagnosis services have been directly integrated in InspectIT, and we can perform automatic performance problem detection. Another interesting aspect is the possibility to be able to set up some notifications with thresholds. And that means simply we define some thresholds on specific measures on specific fields. And of course, when these measures exceed the value of the threshold, the notification will be triggered. And that works with the long-term data persistence and InspectIT alerting capacities. And I have mentioned in a former slide, we have also the possibility to connect InspectIT APM with other dashboard monitoring user interface, such as Grafana, and that we do when we are also using it in combination with long-term persistence database to set up the web-based user interface. And that's what we have seen before on this slide. The connection between the long-term monitoring database and monitoring user interface that are web-based user interfaces. All right, and that was quite an interesting tour of InspectIT APM. I find it really, really interesting that we can use it very simply and in an efficient way, even with the default configuration. And of course, we can always go deeper, customize sensors, create new sensors, etc. Thank you for your attention. And is there any question?
Have you this InspectIT running in production, and how big is this environment?
How big is the production environment? Bank farms, as big as you can imagine. I mean,
could you count
classic
JVMs, just like 10, 50, 100?
Yeah, I would say in banking, in core banking environment, yeah, with lots of JVM, lots of traffic, lots of database activities. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. It's working pretty good. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. You're welcome.
So, if you integrate the agent into your application, how big is the impact on the performance of this application? Does it increase the load or the behavior of the application? It's really a lightweight fingerprint. The fingerprint is really light because the way it works, it's these agents are set up some hooks on some methods. For example, you have a hook that runs before an execution of the method, and you have other hooks that run after the execution of the method. So basically, the trace is really lightweight. It's not that heavy, because it won't be running in the background all the time, but it will be listening to the events that happen on these methods. So only when the method is used is that executed, and it's really fast. Yeah. It's using the basic it's using the Java technology for Java agent development, and these Java agents have been built that way. So yeah, it's using something that's standard from Java, that's well known and has been used around for a long time and working really good. Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right.
Okay, if there are no more questions.
Okay, then thank you very much for your time. Thank you for listening, and I was pleased to be here with you.